trees mesmerize me. I love being surrounded by them. I don't understand how they sway and bend with the wind. Me, on the other hand, I pride myself on my determination. My ability to always hammer a square peg into a round hole. My philosophy of where there's a will, there's a way. My hometown is flat. It's surrounded by cornfields, but our local park is filled with trees, and it's my favorite place. On summer days, I ride my bike to the park, and I hang out under the big sycamore tree. I lay on the grass, and I watch the sun shine through her limbs and leaves. I feel held by that sycamore. I tell her that I'm changing my favorite color from pink to purple. And when I'm sad, I cry. And her voice reminds me of Julie Andrews. And I hear her singing, "These are a few of my favorite things." And I know that everything will be okay. In high school, I run cross country in the park. And I realize how hilly it is. And I decide that hills are my enemy. And I stop visiting Julie Andrews. As I go off to college, I have no time for trees. I discover my first book about the Camino, the Santiago Trail. The Camino is a network of pilgrimage routes throughout Spain and Portugal. They lead to the Santiago de Compostela, and pilgrims have walked these routes for over 1,000 years. St. James is buried underneath the cathedral in Santiago. The Camino book reminds me of the park back home. I remember the conversations with my Julie Andrews tree, and I long to reconnect with that part of myself. I tell myself that someday I'll walk the Camino. 15 years later, I read Shirley MacLaine's book, Out on a Limb. You know Shirley, she was all about the woo. She talks about her spiritual journey on the Camino and how she visited her past lives. And I thought, I want to visit my past lives. Another 20 years go by. I get married, I have a kid, I establish my career, and then I find myself divorced. And as I peruse the bookstore for a self-help book on how to rise from the ashes, I come across Sonia Choquette's book, Coming Home. It's about her painful journey after a divorce, and she decides to go walk the Camino. I want to drop everything and hop on a plane to Spain, but my son is 11 years old. The only path I'm walking is family therapy, groceries, and homework. I tell myself, you'll get there when you get there. Last June, my friend contacted me 30 days before she was supposed to walk her Camino, and her sister, who was 70, had canceled. And she said, "Do you want to go with me?" And I said, "Hell yeah." An impromptu Camino trip was right up my alley. I've been pounding square pegs into round holes for over 50 years now. And how hard could it be to walk 75 miles in 6 days with no training? We were walking the shortest route, the English way. A week out from our departure, I found out that the English way is the hilliest way. What? Hills are my enemy. I could hear Julie Andrews laughing. Since my running days, I've had 3 knee operations. Hilly was not on my dance card, but there was no turning back. We walked 13 to 15 miles each day. It took a mile to get on and off the trail. I hadn't accounted for that. Northern Spain is warm in the summer, but last summer when we walked, it was brutal. It was 85 to 90 degrees every day. And on the first 4 days, we spent most of our time on blacktop roads, walking next to cornfields. I could have been walking in central Illinois. This is not what I had expected. How could I encounter magic on a blacktop next to cornfields? My higher self reminded me no one ever attains enlightenment when they're in resistance. I told her to fuck off. I justified my resistance by muttering that this was not the Camino I was promised. which is really funny because no one promised me anything. There was no magical 5-star Camino brochure out there. Even Shirley and Sonia spoke of pain on their journey. I had forgotten that. Walking the Camino is hard in 100 different ways. Heat, wind, rain, the blazing sun, and that's just the weather. My feet, knees, hips, and back were relentless. But ultimately, it was my monkey mind that got me. That was my undoing. I groaned out loud as I walked up every hill. The hills were alive and they were killing me. Every morning as we would leave the little towns we stayed in, we walked straight up these hills for 1 or 2 miles on blacktop. It was like walking a ski slope. Hill after hill, mile after mile, day after day, I kept complaining. Nothing magical or enlightened up in here. I was reminded of my years as a runner. My favorite t-shirt was no pain, no gain. What had happened to that girl? My Camino was filled with hate. I hated the hills, my ex, myself, and the injustice in the world. Late in the afternoon on day 3, I was unable to go any further. All that hate was hard to carry. I stopped and sat under this very old tree, and her branches were all twisted like she had arthritis. And she told me to stop resisting and cursing my path. Her voice was like Katharine Hepburn, and she said to let go and feel your pain. Remember what you're grateful for. As I left her, she said, Michelle, you can do this. I don't do a good Katharine Hepburn interpretation, but she reminded me of Ethel from On Golden Pond. And this was really my turning point. Everything still hurt, but I replaced my uphill moaning with the things I was grateful for. I mean, you can't not listen to Katharine Hepburn, right? We met a theologian after that who was from Pilsen, and he shared that he'd walked many Camino routes, and this was the hardest due to the hills and the heat. Even in my resistance, I'd been posting on social media a word of the day, sharing affirmations, intentions, pictures, and insights. I was having 2 very different experiences, an outer experience and an inner experience. And as much as I wanted to say to the Camino, I wish I could quit you, I was committed on social media. Social media, Michelle, is enlightened. Real life, Michelle, not so much. This bitch is an experiential learner. We hear that days 5 and 6 are in the forest and that they're flatter. This gives me hope. Day 5 is 15 miles. We wake up and head out at 6 a.m. to beat the heat. And as we enter the forest, it's flat. And I say, thank you, sweet baby Jesus. I pass a big tree and I stop to touch it, and the tree says, hello, in a deep voice like James Earl Jones. And he tells me to take a picture of the sun. I snap a quick picture, and when I look at it, it looks like the image of an owl. I walk a mile further into the forest, and I hear the owl hoot. The wind is blowing through the trees, and I feel like they're singing to me. I stop to watch 3 trees in unison. They remind me of angels. I see bright colors of blue and green and red around the trees as if they're feathers. I take a picture to make sure that my eyes aren't deceiving me, and the picture looks just like the feathers too. Finally, some real magic. Everything hurts, but my anger and frustration are now melting away. As I leave the forest near the end of my Camino journey, I come across the big sycamore tree. It's like Julie Andrews has been waiting here for me. I lay down beneath her limbs and feel that there's nothing but time now. I look up, I see the sun shining through her leaves, and she says it's okay to let go. It never has to be hard again. I'm too tired to fight with her. I let go and have a good cry. 38 years after the original call, I finally complete my Camino. Was I enlightened? Only as much as I could allow. Was I changed forever? Yes, but not in the ways I expected. I've set down my hammer and I'm no longer trying to fit myself into small spaces where I don't belong. Julie continues to remind me that the hills are alive. I'm not sure what that really means. Maybe I need another Camino. Thank you.